Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today I'm talking to two of our head coaches, Brad Loomis and Jeff Alberts, all about real-world nutrition coaching. And by that, I mean how we actually handle athletes' dietary planning as they come to us for the first time. I think a lot of the methods might actually surprise you. In fact, the way we handle nutrition coaching now has evolved tremendously from what we did as a team, like obviously 10 and 5, but even like 2 years ago. And you'll hear us talk more about why that is within the first few minutes of the episode. Brad and Jeff will also discuss the type of lifters who apply with us, how they handle competitors versus non-competitors, the questions they ask when meeting an athlete for the first time, which athletes track their food and which ones don't, when they monitor behaviors or outcomes rather than intake, how they directly work with our team's dietitian, and a whole lot more. As always, if you have any feedback or comments on this episode, go to 3dmusclejourney.com or to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj and leave it under podcast number 154. Let's get into it. Here is Real World Nutrition Coaching with Jeff Alberts and Brad Loomis. Brad, what's the biggest difference in how we used to receive athletes, like, say, 5 years ago, what they were looking for and how far they were from a prep versus the majority of how we get our athletes now, like in what shape or status or whatever? That makes sense.
Wow. Yeah, it's a lot different. Probably the biggest difference being that it's a much more diverse group, I guess you might say. Because it used to be pretty much we had people that applied that were going to do a show in 12, 18, 20, 24, 28 weeks, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now, shoot, we get people that they're going to do a show in that long. Sometimes they don't track at all and they just want to lose weight. Some people don't want to lose any weight at all and they don't want to, think too much about nutrition, but they know that they need to think about it in order to get the most out of their training. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest difference now is it's almost like a box of chocolates. You're not quite sure what you're going to get.
but that's like by design, right? Jeff, the first 5 years they all had athletes, it was one, it was strictly competitor coaching and preps, but two, that was sort of the industry standard to be like, I need a prep coach, so I will acquire a coach when I am ready to prep, right?
Yeah, I think more or less 5-6 years ago, it was pretty almost, I would say, cut and dry as far as, hey, we're taking this person on and it's either, like Brad said, it's, hey, this is going right into a prep, like right then from the get-go, or, hey, we're going to do an off-season, then go to prep. So it's more or less like our primary clientele was like competitive athletes, either bodybuilding or powerlifting. Whereas now, like Brad was saying, it's more diverse where it's almost like you said, we don't know what we're going to get. We're either going to get someone who's prepping now, which I think is more rare. It's more, hey, we're going to do off season. And a lot of people I've come across lately is like, I'm not sure if I'm going to compete or not because they're not aware of, how good they are or how good they can be. So it's very diverse as far as their goal. Like they're not sure if they're going to be competitors. Some are competitors. They know for sure. Some are like, hey, I'm not sure. Maybe I just want to build my physique, recomp, get a little muscle, get leaner. Or strength goals or what have you. So it's I think now we work with a much broader range of people, from the competitive athlete to the non-competitive athlete, and that can have like a lot of context there depending on the person.
Yeah, but it's like by design too, because I guess the evolution, because I started following 3D 8 years ago and came on the team about 5. Oh my God, I can't believe it's been that long. Okay. But it came from a place of wanting to serve our athletes better, right? Like we learned that bodybuilding, not just learned, but it's like you learn over time and then we implement, right? And at first the big change was bodybuilding doesn't only have an in season. So that I know that was one thing, was like, it's not bodybuilding. A career bodybuilder knows that you don't just think about bodybuilding for 12 weeks out of a year or every other year or whatever, right? And then also that we would have more successful prep with athletes the earlier that we got them, the better we knew them, the more experience we had with them as a person and an athlete. And then also we almost, I guess we like asked for it. Like, it's not that we never went away from specializing competitors. It's just we recognize that competitors start much earlier than, I don't know.
Yeah, and really, to be honest with you, I like this way that we do things a whole lot better. A whole lot better. I mean, the outcomes are usually always better. The physiques are always better. They always get in better condition. They always hold on to more muscle. Yeah. I totally agree. It was by design, and it was kind of one of those things where we wanted to do it for the purposes of serving our athlete. And then a very positive, unforeseen circumstance of that is that we got better outcomes, was the bottom line.
Yeah.
We got, just better athletes that ended up competing a whole lot better once they got on stage. And so, yeah, I mean, like I said, in a nutshell, I like the way we do it now a whole lot better.
Well, and it like makes a better, I feel like as a former coach / also as an observer, like our athletes are better after the season. Because if you just talk to if you have a first time competitor that gets a coach for 16 weeks before their first competition, it is almost a never good situation once that competition season's over, that first one.
Well, everything's super rigid. So if
And fast.
Like right now, I'm thinking
and
like while
life-changing.
you guys are talking, I'm thinking about like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. I could recall like if you weren't doing things according to science perfectly, it was almost like you're frowned upon. Because I got a lot of heat personally because I had like these ranges with my nutrition, or these refeeds that were auto-regulated, or even like the long ass preps that was like 47 weeks. Remember when I did a 47-week prep, everybody was like, oh my gosh, what's he doing? He's going to lose muscle. But a lot of what I was doing was based off of context, how I was kind of trying to go about my journey based off of X, Y, and Z in my life. So what's kind of interesting to me now as I scroll social media and I see coaches saying, oh, now it's about having athletes gain autonomy and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, so here it is. Like back then I was like considered this outlier, but now all of a sudden this is what we're supposed to be doing now.
Just a trailblazer, Jeff.
Like if I think back to when I first started coaching, it was like I had no business coaching, knowing what I know now. You know what I mean? So a lot of it back then was like, hey, we need to have X protein, it has to be perfect, X carbs, X fat, it has to be based on external sources versus taking into like the individual context, how this person can adhere to it, how they can sustain it. And like you said, Andrea, okay, once we're done doing either a contest prep phase or a cutting phase or whatever, how is this person going to be able to handle the transition away from all that? So like we always talk about on this podcast, we think about more so the long term, the big picture, not just this small little phase that a certain person is in.
Yeah, and not even like your athletic career, but like, will you have an eating disorder when we're done with it? Well, I mean, everyone does on the, don't want to say that. Everyone has disordered eating behaviors for a little bit after a prep. But man, I feel like there's a lot less train wrecks in general. That I know we went through them. I know the three of us have talked at length about how our first individual preps were, put us in like 3-year sinkholes of disordered behaviors, to say the least. But now it's like the way that we receive athletes now is so varied because we've found that the athlete not only competes better, but heals better and continues to have a better life after, when they have not just that we know their body better, but like we have an operating system within our coaching. We know their likes, their dislikes. We know how they're training, because training adaptations take so much longer than nutritional, and people forget that sometimes. But man, it's like seeing some of the stuff on Instagram where someone's like, been with 3D for 4 years, excited to do my first prep. And I'm like, what? That's so cool. But obviously we didn't get that person and start their macros week 1 or whatever.
Yeah, because anymore, when I have to, when I'm presented with somebody that's like, okay, I want to compete in this show in like 15 weeks, I'm like, God, I cannot believe we used to do business this way. Where it's kind of like, okay, we got to get your height, we got to get your weight, and then I want to talk with you, and let's try to figure out about a maintenance now, and then we'll do all this, and it was just like, oh man, I can't believe we used to do this. And it's like, it kind of freaks me out, because...
And if you think about it, like, okay, so here we get this person, we know hardly anything about them besides what they listed in an application. And even back then, like we're talking 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, a lot of times we weren't even doing a Skype call with the person to set them up. So we're just basically going off of what this application is saying. Yeah. So we're creating a plan based off of this application, as well as what science is telling us might be best practice. So we have no clue how this person is as a person, like what their behaviors are, what their family life is like, their job, any of that stuff. Like we don't know their day to day. So in a sense, once we create this plan, this person has to follow what we're saying, and it's going to be somewhat rigid, right? Because, hey, I don't know nothing about you, but you have to follow this.
And you won't know if it works for like a couple weeks.
Exactly. Yeah. And even if it does work, so there's a like whenever I see numbers in a spreadsheet, let's say it's someone's training numbers and everything looks cool. Oh yeah, great. Their numbers are moving up. Everything's progressing well. You don't know if that person, if they're in the gym progressing well, as in, hey, everything feels good, or hey, this is such a struggle. My joints are hurting. I'm not enjoying it, etc. So you can execute the plan, but the question is it enjoyable? And how, when you are doing it, is it actually feeling good for you or not? Like I can do something in the world and it can be super, super hard, or I can do something else and it's easy and I'm getting the same result.
Yeah.
So more or less when you're setting this person up without knowing anything about them, like you could be creating some plan that it's just miserable for this person.
Yeah.
But they're going to do it anyways because, hey, coach says I this is what I have to do, so I have to do it.
Yeah, because they're excited and their show's coming up, and like you're like in a when you receive an athlete or like have an athlete that's like say anywhere less than 20 weeks from their actual show, there's a different mentality than someone who's like, I'd like to be a competitor within a year or two. Like, so if you only know someone 15 weeks out or whatever, and maybe it is ruining their life, but they're just so excited and they flip that mental switch of like, I'm doing my first, not even their first show, like, okay, I'm in season now. And then that's how like that same program, if they had it 6 months earlier or, 6 months later, wouldn't, or not even that same program, but like that same type of training would crush them once that immediate motivation is gone. But you don't know that because you're their coach and their spreadsheet looks cool and they're pumped. But their wife like hates him now or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've belabored that we have a different type of athlete, and sometimes not even, well, I guess they're all athletes, right? Because if you're someone who is willing to put forth your hard-earned money, time, and attention into getting a coach, you obviously care about this, usually. So even if we have non-competitors that I know just want to be better and want to be taken seriously, that hire us too. So I don't know. Should we start with like Gen Pop? Like, or someone who, I don't know, is like, I want to see what competing is like. I want to be a better lifter. Like, what do y'all get the most that's not someone who's like, I'm in prep?
Well, I think...
Can I say something real quick?
Both y'all go.
Because you mentioned Gen Pop. So I think for me, when I hear that term, because a lot of times someone might hear that and go, okay, I might be classifying myself as gym pop because I'm just trying to maybe lose a little weight or I want to look a little bit better. But you know, that old saying is, whatever you put in is what you're going to get out. So
Right.
I think a lot of time when we say gym pop, it's not, hey, that means you're below like a competitive bodybuilder or someone or a power lifter or whatever. Like you still have to put work in. You still have to probably maybe diet rigidly for a time being to create the effect that you're looking for, the result we're looking for. So I think a lot of times gym pop gets classified as quote unquote like softer, which can be true, but it's still, you have to kind of go through the same types of things that other athletes have to do in order to get the result you're looking for. So if you're expecting to be like, hey, I want to walk around at 12% body fat, or 14% body fat and look beach good, then that's going to take work to get there. If you're 20% body fat, it's not like you
Right.
can just say, okay, I can't track macros. Like I don't want to track macros, or I don't want to have any accountability with nutrition or
Yeah.
with training. There has to be some type of structure in place. It may need to be more rigid than you like. It may not, depending on the person's like experience level. But there again, it's like what you put in is what you're going to get out. So I just had to throw that out there before I let Brad kind of talk.
Yeah, because before I talk about like I guess my favorite kind of scenario to expand on what you're saying there, Jeff. A lot of times, what people want and what they can do are two totally different things. Like you were saying, they want to walk around at 12% body fat, but they don't want to track macros. Well, there's not very many people that are Alberto Nunez type, metabolisms that can do that and not track. Most people to walk around at, 12%, it's not stage lean, obviously, but that's pretty darn lean. That's a lean gym goer, and not very many people can sustain that and do that and not at least pay attention to their calories, or at least their weekly calories, if nothing else, and so a lot of times you just have to be realistic with people. And it's like, okay, you know what? Here's the deal. I know you want to be 12%. And if you really, really want to be that 12%, you're going to have to track for a while. You're going to have to track for a good while until you figure out how it is that you need to eat without tracking in order to sustain that. And if you don't want to do that, we can't be 12%. You're going to have to just be happy with 15%, 18%. You're going to have to be happy with this look.
Yeah.
Knowing that you got to make more effort. You got to do more work in order to get what it is that you want,
Yeah.
So I just wanted to expand on what
No, I
Jeff
like
said.
that.
Really.
Go ahead.
It might have to be rigid at first. Hey, let's get you from 20% down to 12 or even 14. Like it's going to be a little more rigid. It's going to be structured. You have to follow through on it. And then, like I said, in the beginning, you say, hey, we can get you from point A to point B, but to hold point B, that's a whole new set of questions that can't be answered right now.
Right now.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like we can actually take you through the process, get you there, but then it becomes like, okay, now that you're at this new body fat percentage, is that sustainable? Is it healthy? What kind of quality of life are you going to have? Are you going to be hungry, food focused? Where's your energy levels going to be? Is your body going to be pliable and durable in the weight room? Like all these types of questions, there's no way until you actually get there. So, and a lot of times it's like as a coach, you're kind of like thinking like, okay, is this the best route to take? And like whenever I set up a gym pop or like quote unquote off season, let's say this person doesn't want to get on stage, but they want to look like more like a bodybuilder. That's the question, I pose to people is like, we can get you there, but then once you get there, it's a whole new set of questions. And the big thing for me, being that I've been doing this for so long, is like quality of life. Like you can walk around with abs and it might look cool because I've done that, but it takes work.
Yeah.
And it means a little bit of sacrifice here and there. And sometimes it's just not worth it. So it might be worth it for me. It's like, okay, instead of 12%, hey, let's hang around at 15%. Yeah, it looks a little softer, but man, I can take my wife out on a date. I can, have a glass of wine. I can get a scoop of ice cream or whatever and not have to worry about it. So,
and there's health consequences too to forcing your body to be something that you want it to be when it doesn't necessarily want to be that way. Sure, maybe you are able to bite the bullet and you're able to be hungry and track your macros and be, really super, super rigid because you like how you look. But I mean, how many times do we see women lose their menstrual cycle? You know, how many times do we see that guys all of a sudden have the testosterone, production of a 75-year-old woman? That happens. That happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes the longer that you subject your body to that type of an environment, the more drastic, the more dramatic those mal effects are,
Well, and at some point
so sometimes
too,
we got to just,
sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just gonna say, sometimes you just got to find a happy medium to where, okay, you're not that shredded, but now you're a little softer and you're healthier. You have a menstrual cycle. You actually have normal testosterone production. It's just you have a 48-year-old man's testosterone production instead of a 28-year-old man's.
Yeah, but also it can backfire. Like if I did this to myself too. Like you get to where you want to be and you're like, no, I can live like this because I'm hard and whatever. But then after like a year or two, you're like, man, I don't look any better. There's not more muscles. In fact, I almost look softer. So, like the muscle wastes at some point and it's like counterproductive. And if physique is your goal, like a lot of times if you hang out too lean for too long, your physique actually backslides. So,
and you see that a lot too in like I can think of just off the top of my head, two very well-known, whatever you want to call them, fitness professionals, that they look smaller. They look smaller now than they did back in 2011, 2012,
because they kept it tight for the gram. That's what happens.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Or their business, or to look good on that thumbnail on their website or whatever. Yeah, I mean, you see it. You definitely see it.
And we're not saying that's wrong. It's just like it's your priorities at any time. And like Jeff said, like there's things that sound good now, and 6 months down the road, like your priorities might change. The way you feel about your life might change. Sometimes things are worth it. At the very same person, I know some things seem worth it at times, and sometimes they just don't. Like, and I know I've had athletes that say like, I don't want to compete, and then they see themselves after the first cut, and they're like, oh shit, maybe I can, or vice versa.
Well, a lot of people, if you think about it, in our field, I would say 9 out of 10 people want to put more muscle on. Like that's their goal. I want to put more muscle on down the road.
Yeah.
They want to be lean, of course. Like that might be like their initial goal. Hey, I want to be lean. I want to see my abs or whatever. But big picture wise, they want an improved physique, like more muscular physique. Well, that's going to take time. And a lot of the people we work with, the age group, we work with a lot of 20-year-olds, 30s. And I think we work with 40s and some 50s, but majority of it's going to be on the younger side. So we know natural bodybuilding, like you're going to be able to continue to improve your physique for years to come. So why would you shoot yourself in the foot, spinning your wheels for 2 or 3 years, trying to force your body something that it probably doesn't want to do?
Yeah.
Whereas you can be like, hey, let me just eat a little more food. I'm okay with being a little soft, but you're going to be a better environment for that big picture as far as putting more muscle on over the long haul. And that's what's really going to make your physique look a lot different, is putting more muscle on. Like I think back when I was in my early 20s and compare it to when I was in my 30s, like, in my 30s, I had more muscle. So there's been times throughout my career where I've been leaner and other times softer. But, I've never had anybody when I'm soft look at me and go, oh gosh, you look terrible. Like yesterday, I was taking Ethan to the store. And I get in my truck, and the house behind me is for sale. So this guy pulled up with his wife in his car, and he rolls the window and says, hey, bro, you looking good. And I'm like 20%, 22% body fat right now. Right around there, 20 to 22.
I know. So, Jeff in shirts, man, it's not even fair. Jeff's forearms, for the listeners in person, are specimens, just so y'all know. He could not lift. He could gain 40 pounds, and he still looks like he lifts because his sleeves are rolled up.
But I can relate to people that they want to look better. Because I'm like right now, if I had to go to the beach, take my shirt off, I'd be like, yeah, I'm not going to feel 100% secure with that. But I also know too that I'm probably never going to see these people on the beach ever again. And why am I going to let a little bit of insecurity on my part rob me from the enjoyment I could have on the beach?
But you're not trying to get honeys at undergrad. It's an example of priorities. You know what I'm saying? Like if you were 21 years old and in college, you wouldn't be like, it's okay if I don't look the way I want to. You'd be like, we're doing what we need to do because we need to do it. I'm just
okay. I mean, this is a whole nother layer of conversation.
No, but I get what you're saying.
To me, I'm like, okay, if this chick only likes me because I have abs,
I'm telling you, you were different when you were 21, Jeff. I know I was. No, I get what you're saying though. But you know what? That was a good point how you said like they want to do this for years at a time, and it sucks to say because I used to hate when people told me this when I was younger. But like your priorities will change just because you're maturing and you think differently about situations like that. I used to hate when people told me that.
I try not to be that old coach.
Me neither.
Okay, I've been doing this for so long. Sound like that dad. Like, okay.
But so you've been working with athletes
I try to think both ways. Like, but I mean, when you're having a hard conversation with someone and they're like, let's say they're 20 years old and they got like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, this person has 3 decades ahead of them still.
At least.
To keep improving their physique.
Yeah.
And they want to diet like right now because they want to see abs.
Yeah.
And they don't have that much muscle to begin with. You're like, okay, let's get the priorities straight. You know, as far as, hey, let's put the muscle on first. You're going to make your physique look better regardless because you're putting more muscle on.
Yes.
Then, hey, after we do a good stint of putting some muscle on and making sure you're eating enough, etc., then we can run this cut that you really want to do. And you're going to look better for it. Yeah. And you're going to be more mature because you spent time putting muscle on, learning how to, eat for muscle, making sure you're eating and getting all these nice behaviors in place. And when you go to cut, well, if you do it right, then like we've talked about so many other times, like you're going to diet better. You're going to basically retain the muscle that you earned.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that brings me, Jeff, that's a perfect segue to like my favorite client. My favorite client is the client that comes to us and says, here's where I'm at, here's where I've been, and I want to compete in bodybuilding, physique, maybe it's powerlifting, whatever. But I don't really have a timeline. Coach, what do you see for me? Oh, I love that. That makes me feel more like a coach than anything, when they just kind of like give it to me in my hands, and then it's kind of like, oh, okay, now we're talking. Okay, first of all, let's look at timelines. When are you thinking you want to get on stage, And then it's just like planning for a powerlifting meet. I just kind of work backwards from there. Okay, now we're talking. You want to compete October 2022. So from October 2022 back to, basically February, March, April, that'll be your cut. But from April, February, March, April of 2022 back to somewhere in 2021, that's going to be our pre-diet diet, and then this part's going to be our diet break. And then this part's going to be our growth phase, which brings us to where we are now. And this is what we're going to do. I love that. To me, that is kind of like our primary responsibility. Know the goal that they want. We keep our eye on that goal as long as they still want it, of course. Sometimes they change. Mm-hmm. But then we divvy out in clear, concise instructions what they need to do each and every check-in, each and every whatever, to get them toward that goal. I mean, that to me is just like, that's a slice of heaven on earth when we have that kind of a setup, And then when they kind of come to us and they're diverted and they're like, oh man, everybody's cutting for the summer right now, coach. And I'm kind of thinking I want to cut right now. And I'm like, okay, well, sounds good. Let's, like Bolt on the Pixar movie, let's put a pin on that. Maybe we can work it into a phase of our training right now. But the big picture goal that we first talked about, competition, October 2022. And, we want to take steps to that, But yeah, that's my favorite kind of client. And surprisingly, there was quite a few out of this last batch that we got that were like that. And it was just every time I got that presented to me, I was like, oh man, I get to put my coach's hat on, get to start plugging away at the calendar. And oh man, that's my favorite right there, to be honest with you.
That's so cool. That's such a good, I'm glad you laid it out that way, like in reverse, because that's a perfect example of, what we were saying at the top of this conversation. Like, we're not getting the people 15 weeks out or whatever, but it's not because we're not getting athletes who it's almost like we're getting smarter athlete. Not that they were dumb, but like it's like we as an industry know better now. It's becoming a little more common knowledge that you can have a better season 2 years from now if you think about it now. And so that leads to, well, I guess what we're talking about now, and the fact that one, we have a more diversified group, but it's the real world nutrition coaching of it being like, it's not, hi, nice to meet you, here are your macros. It's, okay, nice to meet you. We got a lot of shit to talk about and a lot of things to look at and a lot of things to consider. And that may or may not involve tracking. It may involve discussing your food choices. It may involve just worrying about your training because things seem okay now. And like Jeff, you had mentioned, I think before the call started, or where you are in your ability to track, like your dietary practices at home. Have you done this before? So man, there's so much you can get into this, but yeah, you'll have to be, not even have to be, because y'all are so experienced, and there's so many things that I know flash through your head that you don't even have to think about anymore. That just I know it's back of mind for y'all, but can y'all talk about that? All the things you're considering every time you get an athlete that maybe is a 2-year out, do what you will with me.
Yeah, before we even get to there, there's kind of a nice reassurance that we have. There's a really nice reassurance that we have, because there's a lot of stuff that we think about in the back of our mind, but we also know that there's going to be a second set of eyes in the form of Steve Taylor, our dietitian, overlooking us and just getting another brain in there. That's very reassuring. And so sometimes we can be kind of, I don't want to say cavalier, but we can kind of say, okay, this is what I think would be best right now. But then we were always going to have that reassurance that, this might be a little bit better, once we get that second set of eyes on there.
Can you explain that a little bit more for the listeners?
It's usually stuff that is I'm not even aware of, for example, Steve will get the application and they'll look at it and they'll be like, okay, you know what, this person, has a history of, shoot, I had one here recently and I can't think of what it was, but we'll just, because I'm familiar with it, we'll talk about PCOS.
Okay.
This person has a history of PCOS, and I saw that you put them on a higher fat diet, but did you think about possibly telling them to get these kind of fats or that kind of fat, or to have more fish or to have more nuts, or, things like that? That's all the kind of stuff that I wouldn't even think about, and when you have that second set of eyes and that second brain to kind of back you up a little bit, it's kind of reassuring to know that we're not going to have little things that fall through the cracks. You know what I mean? That is
cool. Yeah, I forget because I am not the one that receives the applications and I am not a coach, that we have that system in place that the apps or the initial programs are always overlooked by our dietitian.
Yeah. So once we, as coaches, once we assign macro targets or ranges, protein, fats, carbs, or whatever, and, the fiber intake and all these things, Steve basically overlooks everything that we assign. So if everything in his eyes looks good, we don't really kind of hear from him. But like Brad was saying, on rare occasion, if there's something that's kind of a red flag, maybe, we've assigned maybe too much fiber or something like that, for example. Or I had one gentleman that was coming, he was on a low carb diet. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, probably we need to get his carbs up to help fuel his training, that type of thing. So I increased his carbs kind of significantly from the get-go. And then it basically what we ended up noticing with this guy was that he was getting GI distress. So basically Steve's like, hey, you went from X carbs to now X carbs. So it was a significant increase. And basically he followed up with questions to the gentleman. Hey, what kind of fiber, what kind of carbs you now taking in? So in a nutshell, his fiber intake was just going through the roof.
Right. It was just like a side effect. Yeah.
So he's just said, hey, Jeff, next time let's taper those carbs up slowly. Hey, let's just gradually increase them over the course of so many weeks instead of just going from 100 to 200 or 100 to 300. Well, I can't remember the numbers.
Right.
It was quite a while ago. But that was a learning experience on my part, because again, as coaches is we're not we didn't go to school for nutrition specifically, whereas Steve did.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's why I'm proud of this team, because we have certain specialists on the team can overlook these things and make sure that we are thinking about the client's overall health, the athlete's overall health. So it's not about just, hey, I need to get this person shredded, or hey, I need to get this person huge. It's like we want to do it in a way where it's healthy, physically, mentally, and emotionally, like taking all that into account. So that's more or less kind of like how our interactions as coach and our RD is like. Or he'll even say, hey, Jeff, let me know how this one works out. Like everything looks good, but I want to know, keep me in the loop with how this one's working out. So he kind of just makes sure that, hey, we're okay even after that initial call, which is cool.
What's going on, 3DMJers? Eric Helms here. Thanks for listening to our podcast. I just want to take a second to tell you about MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. This is a monthly research review that I put out with Greg Knuckles, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Dr. Eric Trexler. We cover the most up-to-date, peer-reviewed research in the world of strength and physique sport that's directly relevant to your practice as a coach or an athlete. We provide our reviews in written format, but also, since you enjoy our podcast, in audio roundtable reviews where we discuss the research in depth. Finally, we also do video concept reviews where we cover a broader topic in video format for your learning. For fitness professionals, you can take quizzes on MASS content and earn continuing education credits for most of the biggest certifying bodies in the fitness industry. If you want to sign up and get a subscription, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and click on the products tab. Thanks for your time, and thanks for listening.
So, Andrea, you'll have to forgive me because I kind of got on a tangent and I forget what your original question was.
I forgot too. I was talking, what was it? Like how when, let's just say we do have that perfect scenario that you were talking about where someone's like, I'd like to be a competitor one day, I think maybe within the next couple years. And then it was like how all the things that you guys consider with setting up their program. And we have a very old episode that I'm not going to direct people to on this podcast, but I know the answers then on how to set up a nutrition program-ish type of was a lot more numerical. It was a lot more like Jeff would say, based on the science that we have. And now it's not like we don't use that, because obviously we do, but it's no longer hi, nice to meet. That was what I said. No longer hi, nice to meet you. Here are your macros. It's hi, nice to meet you. And here's all the shit that's going on that I'm thinking of as a coach and where we can start.
Gotcha. Yeah. I think I know where you're going with that. Cause like a lot of times, especially like right now, if we're looking at a show that's quite a ways off, very rarely do I say, okay, let's lose weight right now. I mean, unless the person is really, really heavy, and they have competitive aspirations. That's really the only time where I'll say, okay, let's start losing weight right now.
And that's like the opposite, right, of what it used to be, because everyone came for a cut or a prep.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. And if we're out from a show that's that far away, normally I'll say, okay, you know what? I just don't want you losing weight right now. That's the only thing. I want you to weigh yourself 4 or 5 days a week, record it here in this spreadsheet that I've made for you. And I just want you to eat so you're not losing weight. That's the only thing I want. Or if you do lose weight, it's 1 out of 4, 1 week out of 4 weeks, and then if they want to be a little bit more numerical, they want to quantify things a little bit more, I'll say, okay, yeah, fine. Go ahead and either just track your calories, best guess, doesn't even have to be perfect. Or if you want to try this tracking thing, sure, go ahead and throw your macros in there, get best guess and just, do it every day for, I don't know, 21 days, 28 days, something like that, if you want to, But the most important thing here, if you're going to track, that's fine. I still want you losing weight. Because the cool thing is, if they want to do that, if I get enough data, I'll know how they tick, and I don't even need calories after that. I can just watch what their body weight does, and I'll know what they're eating, And then I can kind of tell them, oh, you know what? You lost this much weight 3 weeks in a row now. That means you're eating this.
Yeah.
If we want to cut, that's where we're going to go, or I'll say, okay, now you've lost weight 3 weeks in a row. We got to eat more. I want you to eat. And that's kind of, the loosest, I guess you might say, of the scenarios that a lot of times that we'll get when we just kind of start rattling stuff off instead of saying, okay, nice to meet you. Here's your macros.
Right.
If I'm getting someone that's like, let's say 2 years, like seriously 2 years away from a show, like, okay, I need to get this person to that point in 2 years' time, depending on where they're at with tracking. Like in my mind, like if this person knows how to track really well, they've done it, let's say they've done it for a few years, then I'm not going to assign like perfect macros to this person. And I might be, hey, most times people like before the application, they'll fill out and they'll put like, this is what I was doing. Then you talk to them on the call, like, well, before the call, I decided to do this and that and this. So I'm like, okay, let's actually track. Let's actually have some accountability here. So whether that's going to be just, okay, let's track calories. Most of the time, I'm like having them track calories and protein. So I know at least they're ensuring they're getting enough protein to support what we're trying to do, and that's build muscle. So I'm like, okay, let me find out baseline. So a couple of weeks they'll do that. Then more or less, I'm going to know what their weight is doing. Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it staying the same? Then based off of that, then I know, okay, what direction to go in. Whether, hey, I need to increase this person's calories, or hey, let's drop it down or keep it the same because, hey, we guessed right from the get-go. But setting these things up, but yeah, I do use some of the numbers like that you mentioned, Andrea. I'm like, okay, I need to make sure this person's eating enough protein. So that's one thing that I'm like really kind of more finite about. Like, okay, let me make sure like roughly a gram per pound of body weight. If they're heavier, like there's a lot of body fat, then I'm not going to use a gram per pound. I might use a little less than that because I'm thinking lean body mass. And also taking into consideration the person, like the question I ask everybody in the first Skype call is like, do you like protein? Do you like to ingest it? When you do, can you digest it well? Do you have any discomfort, anything like that? So if this person's like, yeah, I just don't really care to eat protein, or it's hard for me to get them, I'm not going to force a bunch of protein down their throat. I'm like, okay, what do you think you can do? So can you get 4 protein feedings in per day? Can you get 3? Is it 2? So it's more about, okay, what can this person do as far as like what's practical for their lifestyle. Sometimes you have to push people to get out of their comfort zone in order to see some change, but most of the time I don't want to cause too much stress from the get-go. I want to try to make the process as enjoyable as possible. So that way the adherence is good. So even though let's say it's not super optimal on paper, it's probably going to be optimal because they're adhering to it at least. So we can always work on that down the road. Hey, I can probably slowly but surely get this person to maybe set at 2 protein feedings. Now they're doing 3. Or, hey, now we're up to 4. Hey, great job. And now we're able to, do more things that way. But more or less, I'm like thinking like, okay, if I want to set it, like if I'm having to gain weight, okay, let's gain X amount in a certain amount of time. So it's a 2 or 3 month timeline I might set up. And I'm just basically setting up initial guidelines that we start up based off of a little bit of science, but also what this person, their lifestyle, what they think they can adhere to. And then we kind of go from there. And then we start collecting data. Collect the weigh-ins and then see where their calories are at and go from there.
And that's the same, both y'all's responses, I'm totally assuming, so tell me if I'm wrong, but that would be the same as if someone, like we said, either someone who wants to compete 2 or more years in life and they say that this is what they want to do, or would it also be the same if I'm like, hey, I've been lifting for a few years, I feel a little bit stuck, I don't think I want to compete, but this is just, I want to improve my body composition over time. Be the same kind of thing, right?
Very similar. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll have to delve a little bit deeper and kind of like call bullshit on them because you'll be like, okay, well, how much protein are you eating? Oh, I think I'm eating about a gram per pound of body weight. Oh, okay. What do you eat? And they start rattling off food, and if they have to really, really think about it, like what they're eating, they're not eating that much protein.
Okay, then you're like, get to MyFitnessPal. We need to know.
Well, it's kind of numbers too. Like once they start checking in, right? So if you sign something from the get-go, 2 weeks later, like let's say numbers are looking solid, but let's say the weigh-ins are kind of all over the place, they're up and down a lot, then it's like, okay, something's not right there. Like if I start seeing like 4 or 5 pound swings in their weigh-ins day to day, but their calories are the same all the time, then it's like, okay, I have to probably dive in and ask some questions. How is your tracking? Is this accurate? If you are estimating, where are we at with that? Are we 80% estimating, 90%, 70%? So more or less, you try to find some holes there. And if the adherence, you suspect adherence isn't there, then of course, I'm not going to adjust calories up or down or anything like that until I know adherence is closer to, let's say, 90%. Because a lot of times it's the tracking, like, is the issue, not so much, hey, what I'm assigning. Like the last thing I want to do, let's say, especially if you're cutting somebody, they're not seeing any progress. but yet they're saying they're adhering well, but there's no progress. And okay, there should be progress here.
Mm-hmm.
So why would I lower someone's calories down officially when I know, okay, hey, clean that up. Let's get at least 90% off. And then if we don't make progress, then we can make adjustments.
Yeah. So it
But
sounds
so
like.
many times,
Oh,
Andrew.
go ahead, Brad. You go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, so many times when people come to us and they're at that point that you mentioned, they're just their numbers are stuck. They're not moving. They're not progressing in their lifting goals. At most of the time, it's just that they're holding their body weight down for way too long. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people do that they suppress their body weight for so long that it's almost like their body fights progressing in the gym. It's really almost an enlightening experience that I've just kind of like noticed here, like in the past 18 months, maybe 2 years, And so sometimes you just got to tell them, look, either A, like we were talking about before, if you want to really progress, you got to eat. You're going to have to allow yourself to gain weight.
Yeah.
If you don't want to gain weight, be okay with just kind of holding your numbers where they're at right now and kind of moving at a snail's pace.
And some people look so much better when they put weight on. Like, so it surprises them that like 6 months later, they're like, oh shit.
Yeah, I've had a few people be that way. They're like, wow, I'm softer, but I actually look more muscular, or I look more lean. And it's like, well, that's that muscle that you put on.
Yeah.
Do
you guys find that like when you talk to people, like let's say you're getting someone that they should be like, okay, this person needs to put muscle on, they need to probably gain weight, and you kind of dive into their history, and the history is like they've been cutting a lot, but the way they cut is really harsh, and oftentimes like what I've come across a lot is people eating like really low carbs. Like when they do diet, it's like 100 carbs, 150 carbs for males and whatnot. And then once you have them eat more and they're eating a lot more carbs, well, yeah, they gain weight, but a lot of that's good weight. Like, okay, now you look fuller. You got more glycogen storage.
Yeah.
You're performing better in the gym, etc. So I don't know if you guys come across that a lot, but that to me is like, I see a lot of people, they deprive themselves because they have it in their mind. I need to be lean. I want to be lean. So they're just under eating for long periods of time.
And let's face it, and a lot of times in those circumstances, it works. And so it's hard to get out of something that actually got you where you are, because eating low carb will get you pretty lean pretty fast, But a lot of
times drop
times,
the scale real fast.
They're like skinny fat though.
Exactly.
Like a lot of people you see are skinny fat.
That's what I was just going to say. They'll get pretty lean pretty fast, but they're just not aware of how much muscle it was that they lost, in that period of time. Because there is some, and let's face it. I mean, how many times do we get athletes, gym pop or contest prep or otherwise, that are newbies? That doesn't happen very often. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but almost all of my clients have been lifting for a minimum of 2 years. They're not newbies by any means. And so there's not going to be very many of them that are out there that just can progress regardless of what they're eating,
Hey, how often does it happen that someone hasn't been lifting more than like, say, a year before they come to us? In y'all's experience?
Like I said, I don't
Pretty rare.
really think of
That's sort of
any
the rare side,
recently.
yeah.
I'd say the average 5 years.
Really?
5 years lifting. Yeah. Some
Really?
people
That's
maybe
cool.
2 or 3.
See, Jeff's
A lot of
experience is
people 8 or
different. What do you
10.
think? 2 or 3?
It's hard to say, because we work with so many people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also there's a difference between lifting and like following a program. I would get a lot of people that are like, well, I lifted in football in high school, and then in college I'd go to the gym maybe 3 times a week, and then now I've actually taken it seriously for like 6 months or something.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we get that.
I do see that.
A lot.
I do see that.
How long have you been training? Like, this first question I asked when we talk about training.
Yeah.
Or in general, like when I first get on Skype, that's one of the questions I ask. How long have you been training? Let's just say it's 5 years. Okay, out of those 5 years, how much of it has been well structured? Get the answer. Okay, out of those 2 years that's well structured, how much time have you been spent dieting? And it's like, now I got one. So in a sense, 1 year now. Now went from 5. Now we're down to 1 year of like well structured and
well fed
within a conducive environment to put muscle on. And then let's say this person is 20 years old or 25 years old. 25, that's a good number. So in my mind, I'm like, this person has one good year under their belt and they still have 20 to 25 years left.
Yeah.
So if you put the percentage on that, I mean, so it's like
The opportunity's
the last thing you should be
huge.
doing is like, hey, let's diet. Let's keep
Yeah.
dieting.
Yeah, they're in really prime muscle building age right now.
Yeah. Man, that was really well put, Jeff. The whole
then-
like bringing it down from
Yeah.
what you think you've been training to like actually.
Okay, so now you have this person who's been training for 1 year, right? Was just solid, well fed, but now they're like, oh, okay. And the history is most people's history. A lot of people, I say most, but a lot of people's like gain weight, lose weight, gain weight, lose weight. So now their experience. Then the question is, what kind of experience do you have with dieting?
Yeah.
What's that been like? What's the history? Like, how did you like? Let's say they ran a cutting phase, like a 4-month cutting phase. Okay, how was that like? What did you weigh when you started? What did you weigh when you ended? What was your starting calories? What was your ending calories? Because you want to see what the rate of loss was. You want to see where they ended up. You want to see how much activity, cardio they were doing. You want to see what type of training they were doing during that process, because that will tell you a lot. Because, man, if let's say they went through a 4-month cutting phase and it was just like too rapid, they lost weight too quickly, the rate of gain was high, so more than likely they probably lost muscle tissue. The stress level of that process was probably through the roof. Their wife probably didn't like them, or husband didn't like them through that process or whatever. So it's just like a totally stressful environment, physically, mentally, emotionally. So the last thing I want to do as a coach with this person was say, hey, let's keep dieting. Let's diet. Let's get leaner, because you want to get lean and see abs. So like, no, let's actually eat. And most of the time they're not comfortable. Like, most people aren't going to be comfortable eating and gaining weight at that point. So it's, you have to kind of coach them into actually being patient with like gaining weight. And I have one athlete off season that I basically, this is what we've done. Like, cause initially it was like, hey, I want to lose weight. I want to see abs, whatever. So I had to talk, like, I think we did, I can't remember if we started with a cut or not. And the only reason I would start someone in a cut in this situation is if I know, because I know if they're not on board with it, they're going to do it on their own anyway. And it's probably not going to go
Or with
too well.
a different coach that
So let me
yeah.
coach them properly on a proper cut. Then once they get comfortable, okay, because eventually this is what happens with most people. Great, I got abs, but I look hella small. I need more muscle. Coach, let's gain weight. I need to get bigger. Okay, great. You're on board now. Let's do it. So now we reverse out and we start eating up. But now I've got this gentleman to a place where he's still not 100% comfortable in his skin, because, we're talking 15, 20 pounds heavier than he was. No more abs. He looks on the softer side. His wife loves him more because they get to eat and all that. But yeah, it's just like, now I'm coaching him more about staying in this environment, staying in an environment where your body fat is a little bit higher. Because one, he had when he was cutting too, like when I first got him, there was like low back issues and all kinds of things, like just like a lot of aches, pains. And it's funny how once we gained the weight, a lot of that kind of went away. And of course, now we just have to be very cautious about what lifts we're doing, etc. But his body's just more pliable now.
Yeah.
So now I'm like coaching him into just staying in this environment longer. Summer's coming up. That was one thing. Hey, I'm going to be going on the boat. I might want to take my shirt off. I don't feel comfortable doing it. That type of thing. So a lot of the coaching is just, hey, let's stay in this environment. Let's get you through it, because I know on the flip side, when we go to cut again, after you spend a good year or so not dieting, your physique's going to be better off for it.
Yeah. Well, and throughout that year, like, I know personally the first time that I finally started eating after a lot of years of under eating through my bodybuilding seasons, that I think it was like 6 months where if I look at pictures from that time, I'm like, oh, damn, you were fat. But then 6 months after that, I was like, oh shit, you got kind of big. Like I actually looked like I lifted, but it, like when you say with that guy, well, let's stay here for a year. I think a lot of people would be surprised the first time that they stay a little over what they would like to be for a year. By the end of that year, they look so much better than the beginning of that year, especially if they haven't eaten in a long time.
Yeah.
And then they can find, a lot of times you find that when you do want to lose again and you start to lose, it's so much easier. It's so much easier to lose. And sometimes it kind of sticks. Sometimes it comes off fast. It just kind of depends. But sometimes you don't, like a lot of times, if I have a person that's still a ways off from their competition, or even somebody that doesn't want to compete, but they've been eating well and they've been gaining for a while. If they want to start cutting, or if it's time to start doing the pre-diet diet, a lot of times, by that time, I've got a good amount of data anyway, but I won't even really use it. I'll just say, you know what? We just need to eat less. That's the bottom line. So this is what I want you to do. I want you to eat what you normally have been. I want you to just cut one meal. Or instead of being really full after meal 1 and 3 or 2 and 4 or whatever, I just want you to be just satisfied. Like you could eat more. You feel like eating more, but you don't. You're just kind of hungry after a couple of these meals. And then usually that's super livable. And even though they may or may not be losing weight, which I'll talk about here in a second, because that's kind of an interesting dynamic when you're doing it that way, at least their training isn't suffering. It's not like all of a sudden we've slashed everything. And sometimes when you have them tracked, sometimes they get a little bit too anal, because let's face it, when you first start tracking and you first start dieting, you don't necessarily lick every little chunk of oatmeal out of the bowl, and you don't just absolutely weigh everything to the gram, because sometimes when you do that, you're actually under eating. When you program, say 2,000 calories and you're weighing and you're tracking everything, you don't necessarily lick the bowl clean and eat all the chicken right off the bone. You know what I mean? There's that 2,000 is kind of more like 1896, or something like that. But yeah, what I was kind of getting at was that their training doesn't fall off. And a lot of times what ends up happening is weight kind of stays the same. And then all of a sudden it just whoosh, it just drops. You know what I mean? It's like, wow, I'm not even seeing this number anymore. Wow, now I'm seeing 2 numbers less, and it's just so much easier to lose weight, have your training hold on. And a lot of times you actually end up looking a little bit better on the way down at that weight than when you were kind of coming back up again, if that makes sense. It's like when we were coming up, I don't remember looking like this, but you got to get that environment. You got to eat. You got to be healthy. You got to have everything pretty much intact in order to get that kind of an effect.
Yeah.
That's like when I program someone to gain weight, it's like, okay, let's say if we're gaining, I don't know, let's say 2 pounds the first month, maybe 1 or 2 pounds the second month. You're going to look probably a little softer, possibly after that's over with. Like after you gain 4 pounds, you might look a little bit softer than when you started. But eventually, if you like what I'll end up doing with people is like, hey, let's just maintain this weight now for a month or 2. You're going to make that look better. Because you're going to keep training. Like Brad saying, your training is going to be like, it's going to keep going up. So you're going to make that new weight look better over time. Then it's like, okay, at that point, so we're talking, let's say 4 or 5 months down the road, after you put some weight on the first 2, maintained it for 2. Okay, now the question is, how do you look? How do you feel? Can we gain another 2 pounds or 3 pounds or whatever? Or can we just stay here a little while longer and just keep milking the current body you have? And because your training is going to keep improving and you keep going from there. So instead of like having this huge like bulking phase where you're just like, hey, I just gained 10 pounds in 2 months or whatever, a lot of that's going to look sloppy. Or at least this way, you're kind of growing into your body, like slowly but surely. And
Sounds
eventually, let's say 9 months go down the road, right? You've put on maybe 10 pounds or whatever it is. Then let's say, okay, now let's actually do a 2-month cut, clean it up. So let's say you lose 6 or 7 of it. You're probably going to look significantly better at that weight than you did when you first started. And then you just rinse and repeat that process. But it takes patience because a lot of times, like, people want things now. They want the muscle now, or they want to be shredded now, and they don't have the patience to go through that long process. And it's hard because it's not instant gratification. You're not going to see 4 pounds of muscle in 4 months. Like, that's 4 pounds isn't muscle, like glycogen, water weight, whatever. You're not going to be able to weigh that muscle. A year later, if you've put on, let's say, 2 pounds of muscle as a natural, which you put 2 pounds of steaks all over your body, like, okay, yeah, that looks pretty good.
Huge.
But take 52 weeks in a year? Yeah, 52 weeks. Like 2 divided by 52 weeks. Like, do the math on that. Like, you're not going to see that on a scale. So that's where people get
Yeah.
really caught up, is they're not seeing these things happen right now. It's like a slow, gradual process. But if you take your time doing it that fashion, one, you're gonna be able to put muscle on, and two, you're not gonna get super fat doing it. So you're gonna enjoy the process a lot more.
Yeah. That sounds like a lot of your jobs is, I don't want to say teaching people to be patient, but kind of like the first, say, month of your coaching relationship is finding a baseline that works. And that baseline is obviously y'all are starting a training plan together, and that takes a while to set into. But like nutritionally for this podcast, it's like sometimes that baseline is calories per day. Sometimes it's 4 protein feedings a day. Sometimes it's not having such big swings or whatever. But like almost every, right, unless we get that, which sounds rare now, like the person that's like, I'm going to be on stage in 20 weeks or something. And that's rare. But for most people, most of your athletes, it's creating a baseline together, right? Like maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, that's it. Really, that's the setup that I prefer myself.
Yeah.
Because even people, and I mean, we might as well face it. There's a lot of our folks have tracked in some way, shape, or form. It's almost like an accepted practice to, at some point, if you lift weights and or care about your aesthetics at all, you've tracked in some way, shape, or form. You know, so at least most of our folks, they know about it. You know, they may not be very good at it. They may do it almost excessively, but at least they've done it in some way, shape, or
They're
form.
familiar
You know what
with
I mean?
3 macronutrients and
Exactly,
how that
and weighing
makes
their food
calories
and stuff
and
like that.
I like
Yeah,
to kind of see
But-
where the person is with their experience level of tracking. Like if someone's like super experienced, I mean, there has to have, like, right, when you set something up, there has to be a structure and there has to have some type of accountability built into it. Whether it's like Brad said, hey, I'm just gonna have this person track their weigh-ins or whatever. Like there has to be something to where we can measure to say, okay, this is, because we had to go from point A to point B. There has to be something there to get us there. So it just kind of depends on the person I'm working with. If they're really good at tracking, they've been doing it for a long time, and they're like, hey, I know how to do this. Hey, let's just track your body weight. You know, let's make sure your protein is at least here. Just make sure you're eating enough calories, and let's monitor your body weight. If our body weight is trending in the direction that we want it to go to, according to the timeline that we set up and the goal weight we set up, then great. If it's not, and you're able to keep yourself accountable in these things, then if we're not getting there, then I'm gonna say, okay, we're gonna probably have to tighten this up a little bit. I'm gonna need you to start tracking.
right.
That doesn't mean, hey, I need you to track everything to a T, but hey, let's make sure at least we're keeping our calories in this range. So that way there's accountability there. So, you know, because we do want to get to where we want to go. So for me, it just depends on where they're at with these things. I have one person I just started that they're very green. They don't know how to track at all. Very
Wow.
green. So how do
weird.
I, like, in my mind, I'm like, okay, this person wants to put muscle on. I need to make sure they're eating right. So I got them monitoring the weigh-ins, but the weigh-ins aren't really kind of going the way I want it to. It's like all over the place. So to me, it's like first check-in, I have no idea where we're going still. So, okay, we're gonna have to start tracking. And the first thing I'm like, hey, let's just track protein.
Yeah.
Let's just start there. So I don't really care if we're actually gaining weight, losing weight too much right now. It's more like, hey, let me just get these behaviors in place. And once he gets good at that first thing, then we can move on to the next. And I sent him Steve's videos he did on how to track.
Yes, which are great. Yeah, that one, like
So-
20-minute one that we shared from his sustainable
so
fat
Rick-
loss. Yeah.
Yeah, he basically just went through, you know, hey, this is my fitness pal. This is how you track.
Yeah.
So I sent him there. It's okay. Well, that's our starting point with tracking. And then I have another person that's actually prepping, but it's probably not going to get to the show for probably another year or so.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of weight to lose. And the first month, I was basically just said, hey, we're not trying to lose weight. If it happens, great. Like we got everything set up based off of this person's lifestyle, etc. We got all that in place. And there hasn't been really too much weight loss in the first month. And of course, when people don't see that progress, they kind of like, whoa, what's going on here? And, you know, the emotions start to take over. And, you know, the self-sabotaging starts to happen. Like, no, just you've made tremendous amount of progress. because you have been tracking. Like this person's tracked and everything's pretty close. It's on point. So at least I know this first month, like I was able to establish what the baselines are, where maintenance is at.
Yeah.
And like now we got that in place, and that's progress right there. And just this person just wasn't seeing it as progress. Like, no,
It's hard to
like,
find, honestly,
Yeah.
if you've been either in charge of yourself and changing your mind all the time, if you've not an experienced tracker and you think you're doing it right, it takes time.
But
And
it's
calories are-
frustrating too. Like if you're putting all this work in and you're not seeing like the scale go down, or you're not visually seeing what you want to see, like that's why it feels like you're failing, because that's all you're valuing is that progress.
Right.
Where I'm like, no, that's great if we get it and there's value in that. But what's even more valuable is the fact that, hey, you've stuck to this for a month.
You've developed this skill
You've
that
developed
will
these
serve
skills.
you.
Yeah. And now we know where your baseline's actually at. Now I can make the adjustments. And I'm confident making the adjustment now, because if I change something, because anytime we make an adjustment as a coach, whether it's increasing calories, decreasing calories, what have you, it's a stressor.
Yeah.
You have to get used to it. Like it's going to take a day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever, to get acclimated to that new change.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit of a stressor. So the last thing I wanted to do with this particular person was to be, okay, the first 2 weeks I didn't see any weight loss. I'm going to now I'm going to drop these calories down. It's going to create a big, shitstorm there. So I'm like, okay, I need to basically make sure this person's really solid on the behaviors, the structure, the system that we're trying to run. And then once there's confidence in that, then if I make a change, then it's going to be not as invasive.
Right.
So,
Well,
and
and
also too,
calories
like
are-
anytime you make a change, like I don't know if I lower my calories down. Let's say okay, I go from 2 refeeds a week down to 1, or I skip refeeds, let's say. A lot of times I think about, okay, yeah, that's going to impact my energy levels or whatever, but also like, hey, now I don't have this extra food here where I can maybe enjoy it with the family. Like I think about these things as a coach. How is this going to impact this person's daily life outside of bodybuilding? And not to say that I would never, hey, I'm not going to give this, let me take these refeeds away because I don't want this person to have a date night or whatever. Like, hey, if you have to push through, you got to push through. But I also have empathy too.
Yeah.
As a coach.
And we always talk about calories and just energy expenditure is just such a moving target, and even the most well-versed people, a lot of times in tracking, they'll say, okay, in my experience, 2,600 calories a day is kind of maintained this body weight, but especially we see it right now in today's day and age, our energy expenditure is not nearly up to where it usually is,
Especially with the Rona
And
going
then-
on.
Exactly. Yeah. We're not as active, and the maintenance calories.
We were joking today. We went to lunch. We were talking about that. We're like, man, none of my shorts fit. My shorts don't fit. My wife's like, oh, my clothes don't fit as good as they used to. And then even my stepdaughter, she's like, my pants don't fit anymore.
Because we don't leave. Yeah.
But I mean, even with me, I've done this just basically here at home coaching now for about 2.5 years now. You're regardless of what your energy expenditure is, as we get older, it seems like we need less and less food, to maintain the weight that we're at. I've found that my maintenance is just dwindling, with like every passing year. And I've noticed that I have to put more of a priority on, I used to be able to get away with about 170 grams of protein, if I'm 200 pounds, but shoot, anymore, it's kind of like I don't really feel very good, and I don't really feel like training unless my protein's a little bit higher, And so that baseline that we kind of get there right off the bat is kind of a current, an up-to-date snapshot in time of the way that you're taking in today's life,
Yeah.
Right.
Because shoot, especially young people, if they're very active, you take that away, their maintenance calories per week has just dropped like $5,000. They literally can get by with $5,000 less calories per week than when they were out active and doing this and doing that and running from class to class, and things like that. So I love having that baseline, because then I know, okay, this is how you're ticking. And if I make this adjustment, I can expect this outcome. And 9 times out of 10, when you've got a good current baseline, it ends up working.
Yeah.
And that is such a reassuring thing when you know that person that well, and a lot of times when you know them, then you can you get to know their habits, what their job is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then when they say, okay, well, you know what, my position's changed and now I'm going from supervisory role to being out on the floor. It's like, oh, okay. I'm going to put that little note right there in the protocol in red letters, because we may start to see weight loss now when we don't want to see it. Or maybe we want to see weight loss and we don't necessarily need to make an adjustment on calories because this is how you normally tick,
Yeah.
But yeah, that's another reason why at some point I love to have an audit. I just call it an audit. Let's track for about 3 weeks, get body weight every single day, get a snapshot in time of how you're working right now, because then as a coach, we can make much better decisions and get the outcome that we expect.
That's
Right.
perfect because you're actually having this person track for 3 weeks. So a lot of people are like, oh, okay, I need to find out what my macros are or whatever. They go to a calculator online.
Mm.
Whereas what you just said, Brad's like, that's like far more accurate.
Yeah, it's customized to that person.
you're
That
your
is
own
your
calculator.
calculator. Exactly.
Yeah, and like I like how you said too that it'll change not only because of lifestyle changes, but also like that imaginary person that Jeff's saying. He's like, I got this 25-year-old that thinks he's been training for 5 years, but turns out it's really only one. And say his maintenance right now is, I don't know, 2,600 calories or something. 5 years down the road, when he has that much more, he's 5 years of training under his belt, it might be much higher. And that's another example why calculator wouldn't work. Like as you get better, and in our sport, as you put on more muscle, you just got to eat more to keep it.
How do you guys feel about? Because I'm sure there's probably some people listening to this like, no, it's like like what I said earlier, right? It's kind of contradicting. Hey, the more you put into something, the more you get out. But hey, you're telling these people now like they can do whatever they want based off their lifestyle. That's what some people might maybe think about what we've been talking about. So what do you guys think about the person that says, hey, you need to make sure we're getting in four protein meals per day. We need to make sure the micronutrients are on point. We need to make sure we're having our pre-workout meal perfectly, our post-training meal. Like the hardcore bodybuilder, it's like, hey, I got all my ducks lined up in a row because I want to maximize my gains, man. Like I want to make sure I get everything out of there. What do you guys feel about that?
I think there can be seasons for it, but I don't think I don't want to say no, but it is very, very, very rare. And I mean like maybe 1 out of every 100 people that says that actually lives like that. Because I know we've been around a lot of people for a lot of years, and there are people that preach that, but they'll call it a cheat day. They'll go to someone's wedding and eat 7 plates of food. They'll like they think they're about that life, but every once in a while they break and they can call it something they'll call it whatever they need to justify it. To rationalize it, or call it a refeed, call it a cheat day, call it whatever. But most of the time it's because they need it in order to flip themselves back to the person that they think they are. I've been there too. Like when I say like I underate for 5, that's true. But on the one wedding, the vacation, the whatever, my body weight would swing up because I'd be like, I'm on vacation. And, and like it's, well, and the thing is too, when you've been under eating for so long, like you create, I'm totally now talking about myself, but because I was this person who I felt like I lived really easily in that. And I could go 3 months, no issue. But when that one trip would happen or whatever, or that one big meal or that one family celebration would happen, I would give myself this feedback loop because it'd be one meal or one day or whatever. And I would swing up 5 pounds, right? And I would be like, see, and that's why you can't do that. And so I'd go straight back, and I'd be like, and that's why you live this life so you can look this way to maximize your shit. And now I say not now, but like in the last 4 years of my life, like not only can I eat a meal out and nothing happens, like the next one, not only that, it's like I respond to it less. And not only that, like a meal out and out, if I want to treat myself, it's like, I don't even say that. Like, that's not even my vocabulary because I don't feel like I need to. But like, if we're at an event and there's a dessert, I'll have a piece of pie and that's it. But like when I was having one of those days at an event, it's like, oh, I want one of all the pieces of pie because this is my
Right.
day that I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, literally almost everyone I know who's been like that has a small level of binge eating disorder that is, like I said, justified, rationalized. They'll plan for it, and that makes it, because they have that in their hindsight, it makes it easier to, not in their hindsight, in their foresight, something to look forward to. It makes it easier. So it's like, I just like went way off on you, but like, Jeff, what I'm trying to say is I don't think it's real. I don't think that anyone who says that they live life like that does it all the time. But I don't believe that I'm going off. Some of them don't believe that they're ever breaking it because they've built it in their plan because it has to be there.
Yeah. So let's say you get someone that's
I'm going to make
fairly-
some people mad with that. Sorry. I'm apologizing in advance for whoever
No, 'cause
got offended. But if you're offended, just take a little look because I was offended by that back in the day too.
I would have been totally offended.
Yeah.
Because I was, you guys know me. I was hardcore back in the day.
We've all had times, all
I
five
had-
of us, where it's like we were
I was
stubborn.
I was 6
Yeah.
meals per day, the chicken, broccoli, brown rice guy. I had my Tupperwares. I had everything. Like I was totally hardcore.
Yeah.
But like you said, it was temporary. It was like only in prep. Once prep was over,
See, I did that for
I
like 4
wasn't
years
doing
straight.
those same things in off season because I couldn't. There's no way I could do that year round all the time.
Yeah.
There was no way.
Well,
So-
and even the folks that do it in a more healthy way. I mean, first of all, if you're having binge episodes, that's not a healthy way. You're not finding a healthy balance there.
And if you call it a treat, it might still be a binge. Just saying.
Exactly.
I'm not trying to talk shit. I'm being like,
That
you
means-
just might not
That
realize
means you're
it.
restricted. That means you're
Yes.
being
Yeah.
restricted.
Yeah. But there's I've met people that are more healthy about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They love tracking their food.
That's
they
what I'm
love
saying,
having
yeah.
their pre-workout meal. They love having their post-workout meal and timing it just right. And they don't feel like they have to have it. Like they don't have a meltdown if they don't have their protein shake with waxy maize starch. 59 minutes after the workout, they're healthy about it.
Yeah.
And my response to them is, it's like, if you like doing it, go for it. Sure.
Yeah.
if
There's
it's
definitely
if it's
a
a healthy
spectrum.
thing and you
So,
enjoy
let me ask you
doing
this.
it,
So let's put it
go
this way.
for it.
That's just the way Jeff said it. He said extreme, all da da. And I'm like, everyone who's that extreme about it and screams about it usually has some, needs some release sometimes. But I definitely, for the listeners, like, I bet if they saw all of us on a daily basis, though, they would think, like, if you've never been in bodybuilding culture, us off season looks very restricted to
The
the
average
average
person,
American
Yeah.
diet or the way they
So
lifestyle.
I'm talking
whatever.
like the people who think that if we're not doing all these things, like we're not going to get the most out of ourselves. So
Out of it.
let's say you
Mhm.
have, I'm going to ask you guys this. All of a sudden I'm going to turn into the moderator, right?
It's okay. Be the moderator. Fine.
So let's say you have the same individual, right? And they do it one way where it's like, okay, I just got the big rocks covered. I got, let's say, a gram per protein per pound. I'm eating 3 meals a day, sometimes 2, sometimes 4, but I'm eating around the same calories every day. Same training plan. They're still following through. Everything is pretty much on point with training. So in a sense, a more casual approach, but all the big rocks are in place.
Okay.
And then you have the same individual doing the hardcore bodybuilder where they got their 5 meals, 6 meals per day. They got their pre and post training in there, like the pre and post
Workout.
food in there. Like everything is basically optimized to the T.
Mm-hmm.
Which one do you think is there really going to be a huge difference in the result from these two people? Like, do you think it's going to be even noticeable?
If it is, it's going to take like 20 years for it to show up. You know what I mean? It's literally, there's so similar in the final outcome of it that you would need like 25 years of consistency on both parts in order to see a significant difference. You know what I mean?
Percentage wise, what do you think? 1% better, 2%,
I think
5%, 10?
Yeah. If you're lucky, single digits, not double digits.
Okay, so take it, let's go another layer. So how long do you think the person who's covering the big rocks can sustain that approach?
Exactly.
That versus the person who's like just to the T.
Minutely, yeah. Yeah, there's no way. I mean, I don't care how hardcore you are. I don't think anybody can sustain that type of micromanaging for like even a decade. You know?
I like that you said a
Not
decade
all
because
the
like
time.
I think it can go on for a surprising amount of time. Like I know
Yeah,
I did it pretty easily for like 3 years straight.
I'll say temporarily,
Exactly.
like it
Yeah.
can happen temporarily. So
Yeah.
maybe you do see a little bit of significant difference. Let's say it's maybe like 3%. You look 3%
Yeah.
better, micromanaging
After 20
everything.
years. Yeah.
But if you think about like the real world, like people's jobs, like no one wants to be micromanaged. Like if you ever had a manager that's like over your shoulder every 2 seconds, it's like it gets stressful. Eventually you're just like, fuck, I can't stand this motherfucker. Get him off my back.
Also, like if you have plans, I guess what my brain thinks of is like, well, at first I was like, well, some people have different personalities. I don't think you need to micromanage yourself, but I do think that big rocks can mean having the big rocks covered can mean something different for different people. You know, like some people prefer, like Brandon and I, for example, like my boyfriend and I, we've both competed in bodybuilding many times. It's not just nutrition. Like I'm just a person who is just a more calculated person. He's a little more by feel person, but we both end up on stage and it works out. Right. But there's that. But then also what I think about though is, and Brad said it too. He's like, if you're always at like a level 9 out of 10, when you prep, like where's there to go? It's going to be that much harder because there's no dial up, but there's a very short amount of dialing up you
There's
can
no
do.
dimmer switch, like Jeff likes to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but like if you live life at like somewhere in the 7 or 8s, it's like, and what's weird too is like what feels like a 7 or 8 in your first 5 years of the big rocks covered. It's so ingrained that like 5 years down the road, it feels like I'm barely doing shit. Like I'm just living a normal person's life. But there's places to go. If you ever have the goal of, I really want to gain for the next 6 months, or I really want to cut for the next 6 months, making that switch, you have so much room to make it, so many options of what you can do. Like you said, you can hard cardio, you can take away whatever you want to take away. You can just, like Brad said, like take away your dessert that you like every other night instead of every night or whatever, you know? So it's like, we're never gonna be the same for life. Like your goals are gonna change, your priorities are gonna change. And when you live life that close to your ceiling, it's like, shit, like there's nowhere to go if you do want to turn it on for whatever reason.
So
Because
what you said about like the way you approach prep and the way Brandon approaches prep, like as a coach, that's so important to know that.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, could you imagine saying, all right, Andrea, so it's peak week. So for show day, I want you to have anywhere between 100 to 200 grams of carbs. You're going to be like, what?
No, I'm going to say like, which
you'd be
one?
like,
I'll email you back and be like, no. No.
Yeah, you'd want it like perfect. Like I want to know exactly what I'm doing. Whereas like, let's say someone, Brandon, hey, I want you to eat 200 to 250. He's going to be like, oh, okay. You know, whatever. I can make that happen.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like with Alberto coaching me. He was like, at first, I remember with the training program he put here, you gave me this training program. I was like, I don't think I can follow that. That's like, it was just it just kind of constrained me. But with nutrition, he's like, all right, Jeff, I need we can go anywhere between 200 to 250 carbs. I was like, okay, perfect. Like, so for nutrition, it's okay for me to be like, he can give me like a specific assignment like that. But with training, I was like, I just felt like, no, I needed more flexibility. I need to be able to do my own thing a little bit more.
And you told him that, and that's how it can be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brandon and I are very different athletes.
So, yeah, my point is like, so whether this person wants like these two people, like, or the same person that wants to do it with the big rocks, or it's more to the T, like, I think okay is both under context.
Yes.
And time frames. Yeah. Yeah.
Personality.
All the time.
Unless I feel like if this person, like, let's say doing the big rocks and it's impacting, let's say their outside life, or the person who's doing it to the T and it's impacting people around them, then of course, as a coach, you might want to say, hey, this is what I kind of think. This is what I'm thinking.
Or they need to be somewhere in the middle.
Is this impacting you?
Yeah.
Outside the gym a little too much in a negative way?
Because Jeff, you'd be amazed how many people come to me asking about you, and specifically when they ask about you, like, okay, if I do everything perfectly optimally, and I do get everything like just timed out, my 6 meals, and everything is just perfect. How long do you think it'll be until I look like Jeff Alberts? And it'll be like, well, first of all, I don't think that very many people are going to look like Jeff Alberts, period. But if you're lucky and the planets are all aligned, you'll be there in 15, maybe 18 years. Okay, well, then how about if I be a little bit looser? Well, then you're probably going to be there in 20.
So that's kind of what my point was earlier, was like, when people, like, they're trying, like, they say, hey, you have to be hardcore. It's like, okay, I got to do certain things to look like Jeff. I got to make sure I'm doing it this way. Or,
Yeah.
hey, this guru said this, or science says this. And so they think like everything has to be followed perfectly according to that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more times than not, it's not going to line up with that person's situation, their context, their life context, their schedule, et cetera, what have you. So that's more or less what kind of irks me a little bit when I listen to some podcasts and I look at all the information out there. And then when I get questions from people, like they'll DM me or whatever, and it's always coming from a place of, I need to do it. Like, how many sets per body part should I be doing? Or this or this, or, hey, you're doing this. How come you're not doing this according to this?
Yeah.
So that's what frustrates me. That's my pet peeve as far as like bodybuilding and fitness, is like, because I'm on my tail end of my journey, and I've gone from A to B, but there was so much context in between all that.
Yeah.
I've been
You've
the
gone
hardcore
from A to
bodybuilder.
Z.
I've been the flexible bodybuilder. I've been the family man bodybuilder. I've been the dickhead bodybuilder that treated bodybuilding first before relationships. I've seen it and done it all. So it frustrates me that people still think, and it's no fault of their own if they're just getting into it. Like, they think like there's just this perfect way of doing something.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything in life that's perfect.
Yeah, and when it's your body, there are some things in life that if you dial it up, you'll get there faster. But unfortunately, the human body's like not real, especially with muscle gain. It's just like you said, you can have it on a level 5 versus a level 9, and it might make a difference maybe over the next 5 years. I don't know. But I guess you don't get to train 3 times a day and get muscle gain 3 times faster. It's just like not how it works.
Yeah.
So like
you got to be smarter, not harder.
yeah. Well, also I think a big thing with me that I've learned in the last like 5 years as an athlete is to that reserve, leaving in reserve, because I did the first year when I researched everything on the internet about bodybuilding in like 2010. And I wanted to do all the things because why not? Because I could, and because that's where my money should obviously go, is to 8 supplements, obviously. But it was like, take all the things and do all the things and whatever. And that was it. It's like, if after living like that for so long, it's like, I remember the very first call with Berto when he was like, hey, you can take multivitamins and fish oils and vitamins. Like, stop. You can take creatine. Stop all the other stuff. That was literally like at least $200 to $300 a month as a grad school student on like no monies, but it was worth it in my head. But he we made a very drastic change, like a lot more food, a lot less extra fluff, simpler program, and literally nothing happened, y'all. Nothing happened.
Nothing.
Yeah. I didn't gain weight. I didn't feel shittier. I wasn't slower. I wasn't weaker. Like, nothing happened. And I remember that in itself was like one of the first like face palm, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like the amount of time and money.
But were you like, when he made those changes in your mind?
I was terrified.
Like, exactly. Because I remember my first flexible dieting, like in 2011, that was my first prep I did for going away from the bro diet to flexible. In the first 2 weeks, I was like, I don't know about this. Like, I was super stressed, like learning how to track these things. I was like, I just remember like, this is bullshit. I told myself, this is bullshit. This is stupid. I'm going back to what I know. You're right.
Yeah.
But I said, no, Jeff, just stick with it. It'll get better. So after a couple of weeks, it was like, it got to be more natural and normal. So fast forward through the entire prep, 47 weeks of doing flexible dieting, it was my best ever physique. I was actually had more muscle, leaner, what have you. But
You were
the
heavier too.
But I learned there, I was like, hey, I don't have to be, like, in my mind, perfect. I can eat these, like, at the time, because, eating Pop-Tart or whatever, like, in my mind, that was taboo. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to get shredded with these foods.
Mm-hmm.
But it happened. And then 2014, that was first prep with the family. Now, all of a sudden, my training was, like, not, like, I didn't, like, most of the time was, like, I trained Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And I was always on point with training, hardly ever missed days or whatever. Well, 2014, it was like, my training was very auto-regulated. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I'm going to hold on to this muscle or what have you. And then fast forward, best ever physique. So it taught me, like, okay, more if the big rocks are in place and you're doing things, 85, 90%, 95%, you're not going to see too much of a slip. You're not going to see any regression. Like, in order to see muscle loss, 3 to 5 weeks, no training. I always go back to that. That's my famous line to all my athletes when they freak out. You're lowering my volume, or you're removing this exercise. Stop training for about 5 weeks. Then you'll really know what regression looks like.
Yeah. Well, and what's funny too is, like you said, the first couple weeks you were really stressed out about switching your diet or whatever. Yeah. And it's funny that I remember a time, like, obviously then for you, but like at the same time with Berta, like 2 weeks, if you told me to do anything for 2 weeks, I was like, what do you mean that's 2 weeks wasted? And now I'm like, it's fucking 2 weeks. Like, that's no time.
Mm-hmm. It's a drop in the bucket, right?
Yeah. It feels like nothing. Whereas I was so scared to miss a day of anything, a session of anything, a meal, shit, and you're like, oh, nothing happens. Nothing happens over and over.
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember when a lot of times Jeff would just be conversing, like with Eric or somebody, about certain athlete, and they would talk about, oh well, what, this guy was stressed out and I had to raise his food. I had to raise his food up. And to me, I was like nodding my head, and I'm like, okay, yeah, he raised his food up for a day or two, etc. And shoot, I've kind of learned over the years, you can raise their food up sometimes for like 2 weeks, and literally nothing happens. Sometimes they even still continue to lose weight, and it's been 2 weeks of just breath above the water, but yeah, it's when you're talking about 52 weeks out of the year, it's 2 weeks. What is that as a percentage? That's, shoot, I can't math right now.
I feel stupid. I don't want to answer it.
It's a super small percentage.
Not a lot, we'll say that. How dare you bring up numbers here? Yeah, it's a... But when you look at it that way, right, like how we've said, like at the end of the day, which I know this was not the conversation that we had 4 years ago on the podcast about how to set up a nutrition plan, but at the end of the day now, right, it's like unless it's some weird circumstance, like the goal is set up maintenance, it's going to take a few weeks. That means a lot of different things, but it's really no time it's a very small investment considering all the shit we can get from it over the next year or two. Or whatever, on any goal, with any goal in the sport. It's like the baseline relationship, the baseline body weight, the baseline habits, the baseline, like it tells you almost everything that you guys need to know, right? In that first.
Yeah, and like we said, it's not an online calculator.
No.
It's based on them. This is how you tick, and this is your program, and these are, when needed, these are going to be your calories and your macros, because macronutrient ratios, they do matter in certain times, not all the time, but in certain times. And so, if you establish those baselines, and we know that person and we have the context that's needed, we can set up their program. Like you said, Andrea, they are the calculator because they're the ones that collected the numbers while we were observing them together,
Yeah. That's it. Jeff, closing words?
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
I'm supposed to have closing comments about
I feel like I did my closing comments, and I feel like Brad just did his, so...
Okay, I'll be the godfather and give that the old man wisdom, right?
Yeah.
So, because all the young people listening to the old dad going, oh God, I got to listen to this. Okay. All right. Just tell me and get it over with.
Yeah.
So the way I look at things like bodybuilding now, because I'm looking a lot in hindsight versus like, hey, I got 30 years ahead of me to gain muscle. Like that's how young people don't really think about. Like right now, it's like they think because of X, Y, and Z they see, I need to get to where I want to go tomorrow. When it's actually, and the reality is you have years, like I'm talking years of progress ahead. So you don't have to be perfect. Like you can strive for perfection, but the chances are you're not ever going to be perfect. But if you
Ever.
just be consistent, consistency, like it's so cliche, but it's so true. If you hold yourself accountable, there's structure, you follow through and you're consistent, you're going to learn more about yourself and your process and how to adjust your process over time. And initially, yeah, you're going to look at, hey, let me see what Jeff has to say about this, or let me see what Eric has to say, and how things should be done or whatever. But eventually, you're going to listen less to us and you're going to listen more to yourself over time.
Hey guys, this is Coach Alberto Nunez. Thanks so much for listening to our show today. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I wanted to take a moment to remind you guys that we have a giant video library of educational materials at 3dmjvault.com. The vault is a place where we have organized our best information, paired it up with some of our favorite resources, and shared with all of you guys in one online database. We have courses on contest prep, hypertrophy, posing, fat loss, postseason recovery, and a whole lot more. Most of it is free. Some of it is for purchase to help support this podcast, and we continue adding pieces of updated content to it every couple of months that members always have unlimited access to. Once again, that's 3dmjvault.com, and we really hope you like it.